Hello, everybody. Good morning to you. How are you guys? Looks like we have Bellator, uh, Ben, and Maythreddle on the stream. Welcome to all of you. Thank you very much for tuning in. Excuse me while I get myself a little bit set up here. Alright, I've turned down my mic a little bit. Hopefully that's a little better. It felt like I was a little hot. Let me know how the balance is down in the chat. Just whether or not the music and my voice are, you know, nicely put together and there's not any sorts of issues with any of the sound. Alright, I think we ought to be fairly decent here. I know on Facebook I said that I was going to be working on an LED swap, but the um, the heatsink that was in the hilt was much smaller than I would have liked, so I'm going to hold off on that until I can make a slightly better one. So I'll probably do that stream sometime next week. Instead, today we are going to be working on a chassis design for the 89Sabers Mace Windu hilt. Unlike the last time I did chassis modeling for you guys, I don't have a rough model already put together. So that's going to be the first thing that I'll be working on is getting just the basic geometry of the hilt established so that I can model based off of that and a firm fit up and so on and so forth. So I've got the Mace Windu hilt sitting on my desk here in front of me. Could be so kind and turn my mic volume up a little bit. Yes, I absolutely can. There it is. I've turned it up just a few notches. Let me know if that is any better. I do apologize for the inconsistency. I've been sort of switching back and forth in my setups recently, trying to get, depending on what I'm working on the day, eventually I will have a dedicated streaming area so that I don't have to be moving back and forth all the time and adjusting things. But until then, I really appreciate you guys' input. Alright, hopefully that about does it. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me pull up chat again so that I can see what is going on with you guys. Much better, I'm being told, so thank you very much for that input. I appreciate it a bunch. So let's get what I've been told about this hilt is that with a little bit of modification, it can fit a 28mm speaker, so that's going to be the goal, as well as, of course, a crystal chamber. I've got the main body right now in my hand. It, of course, is not large enough to fit that 28mm speaker inside. Just by, I mean, it would fit a 27 probably. Well, I've got a 27 right over here. Let me give it a test. Not quite. So this would take a 26mm speaker or smaller. In that case, I'm probably going to set this up. I'll see if I can't come up with a method to where I can set it up for a 24mm speaker and a 28mm speaker, so that those who either send it in to me for work or have their own machine tools can do the necessary pommel modification in order to have the 28mm speaker. And looking at that, I can see that it's definitely very possible. All that needs to be done is it would need to be bored out just a little bit further. There's plenty of excess material there, so that wouldn't cause any issues. Yes, Bellator crystals. I always make it a goal to put crystal chambers in my sabers, especially ones like this this Mace Windu hilt, where it's got a threaded joint in the middle. You know, it's like the Graflex. It has that joint in the middle where people take it apart. This is the same way. You'd just be able to unthread it in the middle spot and have the crystals show when you pull off the lower body. Now, that does cause the fact that the body itself is not large enough for the 28mm speaker does mean that it's gonna have to be a choice, right? So it's either going to be 28mm speaker or pull out crystal reveal. So I'll end up actually probably doing, or no, here's what I'll do. I will model it for the 24mm base speaker from Saber Essentials. That's what I will model it for. And then I will also model an adapter so that people can, as I mentioned, if they have their own machine tools, excuse me, or if they want to send it in to me, then they can still just go ahead and use that 28mm high bass, or just a 28mm flat speaker. Yes, Ben, definitely. I will be sharing it around on Facebook soon, but check out Bellator's stuff on Facebook. Her Facebook page is called Corvine's Kyber Caravan, and does some awesome stuff. I just see a gray screen. Well, does it have the SolidWorks logo on it and say "Welcome to the Armory"? I'm going to pop my logo up real quick, and let me know if that shows up for you. And I am taking it back down now. The reason there's nothing going on in the screen is because I haven't actually started yet. So if you did not see that logo pop up and then away, that's unfortunately an issue, and I'm not sure how I would fix that. So let me know for sure. Anyways, as I was saying, I will put in a 24mm speaker and model an adapter for the 28mm speaker so that people can have their choice of setups. You'll have to excuse me. As I mentioned the last time, yes, Bellator is the mind between Corvine's crystals, and it's a very fantastic mind, if I may say so. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just making sure this thing is fully disassembled, or at least as much disassembled as it needs to be, in order to... No problem, you bet, and I probably am butchering your pronunciation there, but my apologies if that is the case. The switch holder that comes with this thing is rather large, and I am inclined to... I'm going to take this out, figure out how that comes out. It looks like there's some set screws down inside there. So I'm going to grab the included Allen keys. Yeah, I've never seen anybody but myself do it on Twitch, but I do lightsaber stuff. Right now I'm working on a crystal revealed chassis for a Mace Windu hilt. The last time I did SolidWorks stuff, it was a Darth Maul hilt. Sometimes I also do the actual creation and installation of the lightsabers. Once I get a camera, such as I'm probably going to pick up a GoPro eventually. I may try to do some streams of the actual machining processes behind building lightsabers, because that is, in my opinion, the most fun part to do. Alright, I have gotten this switch section out, and it's definitely a functional setup, but depending on how much space I can make, I may replace it in order to have more room for the crystal chamber by cramming more stuff up inside the switch area. I do have a question. This rubber, for you guys, this rubber stuff on the hilt came with sort of this white filmy stuff on top of it. And if any of you know a method to get that off without actually damaging the grip material, I would love to hear it. If you are wondering who we are listening to, this is just a collection of some of Chopin's pieces. I am a fan of Chopin. That goes like such. Alright, so it looks like if I use the included switch section, I will have approximately... Uh-oh, where did I put my calipers? I left them out in the garage. I will be right back, guys. My apologies, hang on. Okie dokie. The reason they were out there is because the last time I used them, it was in order to make precise measurements for the tubes on the rods on the Obi-Wan Kenobi Episode 1 hilt that I showed on the last live stream. So, with the included switch holder, blade depth, well, blade plus heat, not heatsink, yes, heatsink, is looking like about 2 inches, which is definitely plenty, so that's not going to be an issue. What I'm wondering about is space for the battery and the board and that kind of thing. We have a distance of approximately 2.125, so 2 1/8 inches between that included switch section and the rear of the forward area, which is not enough for a battery. For a battery, you need about 2.7 inches, 2.71, somewhere in there. Different batteries vary a little bit in length. The ones I use are about 2.71 inches long. The TCSS ones are about the same size as well. So if we stuck one of those in there, it would stick out by about 5/8 of an inch, which isn't too bad. We could have the crystal chamber just not start, or the actual section with the crystal just not start directly at that joint, but about 5/8 further back. But being that there's only a few inches of space in that grip section, I'm not sure whether or not that would be a good idea in terms of fitting the board in properly. So I'm going to give that a measure real quick. Between the threaded joint and the end of the grip section, we have 3 inches 675 thousandths, so just over 3 inches 5/8. If we do a crystal focus is a pretty big board. It's about 2 inches long, which would mean we would have less than an inch. We'd have about a ½ inch for our crystal chamber if we did it that way. So I definitely do think that I'm going to model in a different switch section. I'll use the same included switch boards and the little tabs that they're glued onto. I'll just essentially replicate this piece, except with a channel at the bottom instead of just a hole through it for the wires, I think. And it does look like just barely I can set it up to where a board will fit underneath those switches, so we can have a much larger section for the crystal itself, as well as having space to put in, a hidden recharge port and that kind of thing. So now that I've got a basic plan, I'm going to start using the calipers again to create an exact replication of the space I'm going to be working with, so I can test fit my geometry. So I'm going to open up a new document here. Yes, Ben, it is normal that you only see the SolidWorks logo. None of the dialog boxes or pop-ups or anything show up in the stream. So whenever I'm actually setting up a new document like this or that kind of thing, you won't see it. You'll only see the actual parts themselves when they show up, which I have just opened one up. So you should be seeing something now. I'm going to come to the right plane. And I'm going to sketch some circles. So that first circle is going to represent the inner diameter of the upper section. Which is 7/8. So half of 7/8, this thing measures in radius. So half of 7/8 is 0.4325, I think. 0.4375, that's what it is. And I'll just go ahead and throw this in there as well at the accurate size, which is 1 inch and 35 thousandths, looks like. Measure again down here. One inch, 36 thousandths will go. So half of that is 0.516. That'd be 32 thousandths, 0.518. I'm going to extrude that for the entire length of the piece, which is 4 inches, 555 thousandths. Now at this end, we've got some additional geometry going on. And this is not going to be an exact replication of the hilt, because that would take too long. I'm just going to set up the basic shape of it. So the diameter here is 1 inch, 425 thousandths. Then I'm going to extrude that for a distance of 950 thousandths, or 930 thousandths, from an offset of 335 thousandths. Just like that. That represents the golden groove area with those rounded caps on those grooves. That is between the top section and the bottom section. So this is the piece that joins those two halves together. And right here is the threading, which again, I'm not going to model that. It just takes too long. That is where the threading would be, where the grip section screws on. Now we have to do the cutout where the switches are. So I'm going to come to my front plane. And draw myself a rectangle here. It's going to represent our cutout. And add my dimensions. So the distance from the end of the threads is the first thing that I want to know. That is 2 inches, 110 thousandths. And then this distance on the other side here, I could also do it by finding the width of that cutout. That comes in at 1 inch, 255 thousandths. Just like that. Now I'm going to come and create a cut using that rectangle. Alright, that represents where our switch area needs to be. Now, on real world, what I'm doing right now is I'm screwing this switch section back in, just so that if I do need to get another measurement off of it, it's already there, ready to go. And I can more efficiently get what numbers I need. And that is that. Now I'm gonna save this part, and again, you won't be able to see any of the pop-ups, the windows and the dialogues, that kind of thing. I don't know why they don't show up, but the fact remains that you can't see them. Creating a new folder. I have a lot of lightsaber folders. 89 Windu. Go into that folder and we'll save this as I'm now going to create a new assembly, which is a bunch of parts put together, of course. Right. So now what you're seeing is just two of the same part. The difference is this one on the left is I can only modify the part, and this one on the right I can add other parts to this setup. But before I get too far ahead of myself, I'm going to go ahead and throw the proper color on here. Let's give it a nice bright golden color. Now, it's going to appear a little dull. It always does until I go into the actual rendering mode. I should be done with this part for now. So I'm going to go ahead and close it. Save any changes. And create a new part. Now we're going to put together the grip section. Once again, just a rough approximation where all the critical dimensions match up, but I'm not going to bother with the other stuff. A trophy lightsaber hilt. This kind of is a bit of a trophy lightsaber hilt. It's rather shiny, rather gold. I'm just repeating the same process. Glad you guys are having your own little conversation in the chat. So the internal diameter of this section comes out to 1 inch, 25 thousandths. And the external diameter (1 inch, 307 thousandths). Now the total length of this section is almost 4 inches on the dot. 3 people from Germany are watching. Well, hello, 3 people from Germany, and thank you for watching. Seems like I'm only catering to Germany right now because there are only 3 viewers. Well, never mind. As soon as I said that, more showed up. So welcome to you guys. On this front end here, we got to create a cutout. where the threads would go. Just verifying that dimension real quick. Not that it is super critical. Alright, so this looks about right. We're going to go ahead and, once again, just give that the right color. It is chromed, so give it the chrome color. Just saving this one. Once again, you can't see that dialog box. And once it's saved, all I gotta do is add it to this assembly document. Yeah, like Phasmachrome. I may have to just come up with a Phasma lightsaber just for you because of how obsessed you are with that idea. Oh yeah, I forgot that Matheral was watching. My bad, dude. My bad. I'm gonna blame it on the Germans. Just so you know, I'm blaming it on the Germans. Kristen tells me she's useful. She's tried to be useful, but so far the only thing that she's taught me how to say in German is one more beer. Noch ein Bier. And I probably say it wrong too. But if I ever wanted another German beer in Germany, I could get by. So that's all the basic information we need. It doesn't look like much. But that is the... Yes, seriously. I'll at least come up with a concept for one. But that's the basic geometry there. We don't need anything else in order to put together this chassis design. I don't know. It's just easier than blaming myself, I guess, Ben. That's a valid reason, right? Putting away this main piece of hilt here, as I don't need that anymore. I say it right. Hey, what do you know? Not entirely useless at German, just mostly useless at German. Alright, so as I mentioned, I'm going to replicate the switch section geometry and then cut out the actual shape of the board off of the bottom of that design so that we can fit more in there. Welcome, new viewers. Thank you for tuning in. I apologize if I'm welcoming you late. I can only welcome you as fast as my internet updates. So I got the switch section back out because I quite goofily put it away. Go ahead and close this part again. All right. What's that mean? I mean, maybe it's important, but I don't know what it is. Creating a new part here. I'm gonna build off of this piece. Once I've got it established, I'm just gonna use that as a baseline to create the rest of the chassis from. All right, so we know what the outside diameter is because it fits inside an 7/8 inside diameter. So we're just going to call it 5 thousandths less. That'll give us a nice snug fit with the 3D printed parts. .435 thousandths radius. Ich hab dich lieb, something like that. I don't know. I've never been good at pronouncing other languages. I'm just gonna say that right now. So, if I do ever end up coming to visit, you're just gonna have to do all the talking for me. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and give this a smart dimension so that it stays exactly the same size no matter what we do with anything else, because I'm gonna be adding some additional geometry. First thing I'm going to add is this flat section on the top that the middle gold section sits on. Whoop. I did that all sorts wrong. So, by giving this a horizontal defining aspect, I guess is what you would call it, I make sure that it is centered. If I draw a center line, you can see that it's always going to be centered on this circle. And that's just because it's horizontal. If it were at an angle, then this side could be over here, and the entire length of it would be more towards this side. Wait a minute. Alright, Bellator. That actually makes a little bit of sense. Because I know that there is a piano piece. There's two piano pieces called Liebeslied and Liebesfreude, which are Love's Joy and Love's Sorrow. And once again, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but the Lieb, you just said, is spelled the same as in those two piano pieces. Aha! They are by Fritz Kreisler, if anybody is wondering. They're some of my favorites. I do like myself a little bit of classical music every once in a while. So, back to the modeling. If I'm not careful, I'll get just too carried away having conversations with you guys because I have awesome viewers. I'm going to set the length of this guy. Once again, just busting out the calipers. This one is going to be a little bit of an approximation, but it's also not a super critical dimension. If it's off by 5 thousandths, it literally will make no discernible difference. Or I could measure it this way and actually get it exact, which... See, my original thought was to do it in the original fashion in which I thought to measure it. I would have needed a different piece of equipment on hand, which I don't have handy. but I just thought of a different way to do it that will still give me the exact number. So instead of dimensioning the length that way, we're going to dimension the distance from the bottom of that round section, which is 861 thousandths. Well, love, like, same difference. Same difference. So I'm going to get rid of that guy. And instead, we're going to dimension it this way. 861 thousandths. Like so. Well, there is an E after the L-I-E-B in those two piano pieces. Love's joy and love's sorrow. The next thing is going to be the two cutouts where these switches go and the little metal plates that hold them in place. Now these are going to be a little bit trickier. Just because the geometry is rather interesting. So I'm going to drop those down, start defining some relations here. Throw that in there, make sure it stays horizontal. Once again, just to keep these centered on this middle line of this circle area here. Then we've got some of this going on, with a little bit of that, and a little bit of that. I'm just going to take those guys and copy them right the way across that line there. Boink. And now these have a symmetric relation on them. So anything I do to this side will happen to that side. Like so. So I'm gonna go ahead and create some dimensions here, because those are easy enough to measure. I can get pretty daggum close on those with just my calipers without busting out any extraneous equipment. And looks like I've got 625 thousandths, or 5/8. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing up here. That is 255 thousandths. I believe that there already is the perpendicular relations here, but I'm just going to check. Yep, those two are perpendicular, and those two are also perpendicular, so we're good, because, of course, that perpendicularity relation, because of the symmetricality relation, also applies on this side. This is the only question left. Where is it this way? And that one. That one I can define rather easily. I just have to measure that distance on the physical part. We have 368 thousandths. Boink. Now this angle is all that's left. It's going to be, I'm not sure how I'm going to measure this one without getting out other equipment. There's always a way. It's just a matter of how creatively you think about it. Yes, boing. I am a sound effects kind of a guy. Drives people nuts sometimes because I'm always just making noises. See, now this is no fair. Ben, I want to see your idea. You have to send it to me too. Alright, I've had an idea. Alright, so what I've done is I've measured a 355 thousandths dimension from here to there. Ben, do you have... You can send it to my Facebook page, if that would work. Oh my! That went nuts. I'm not sure what happened there, but the fact remains we gotta fix it. Measure that one real quick. Looks like about 65 thousandths. If it looks post-apocalyptic, then I don't know why Bellacher wouldn't like that. She sends me that kind of stuff all the time. Yeah, you and your Phasma obsession. There we go. Now we have the definition we need. And I don't know if it's probably either really small or not even showing up. But right down here it tells me fully defined. Is it even showing my cursor? That's a good question. Let's check that real quick. Let me pop over here to my settings for my screen capture. Capture cursor. It does say that I am showing my cursor. So if you can indeed see my cursor, it says down here fully defined. If you can't see my cursor, well then I guess we'll just have to hope that you know that it does say fully defined. Definitely I'm right. Allow me to, real quick, we're going to take a peek at this as this salvaged post-apocalyptic saber of yours, Ben. Ah, so we're taking an existing design and making some modifications to it, huh? Sort of a combination of multiple designs. Yeah, man, I don't see any problems with that design. Besides, if it screams you, then more power to you. The last thing that is on this bad boy is a cutout in the middle here, but I'm not going to bother adding that as I'll just be modifying that section anyways. So, get my trim tool. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. And get rid of this little bitty piece up here. And that's the critical geometry of that section. Well, from the cross view anyways, there's our other things that I'm going to have to add. And the length of it should be the same as that cutout earlier. We have 1 inch, 185 thousandths. Just like so. I'm going to pop the holes in the top here. We've got a set of holes that go through the top that are large enough to accommodate the screw's entirety. And then we have a set of holes in the bottom that are only big enough to accommodate the threads. So you can use the screw to affix the switch section in place. And for us, that will mean affixing the chassis in place, which I must admit, the way that it's put together is going to make it for a bit of a difficult install using this switch combination method, or this inclusion of the switch section, because you'll have to, work the soundboard into place after you've gotten the screws inside the chassis, which it is definitely possible. I'm giving it a little bit of thought right now, and the method would be, I think, to just slide it forward, since there's really not much there. Add a little bit of extra wire length, slide it forward until you can access that those switch screws, and then add slide it forward, put the screws in, and then slide it back down through until you can get the heatsink in place properly. That'll be the method, folks. Yeah, I did notice that. I've got a buddy, actually, Jed King from Mastercraft Custom Sabers, who is about to release that hilt, a full machined version of it, available for sale. He's doing a run. Unfortunately, I'm not going to have a whole lot of time to do this today. As I mentioned, there are some other things that came up, but I'll probably continue it at some other point. The deep web. Uh-oh. Yeah, I believe it's Corin Horn, who actually used a speeder bike handle, an Imperial speeder bike handle, to build his lightsaber out of. So that's what that made me think of. Those holes are 235 thousandths in diameter. And the distance from the edge of the hole to the edge of the part is 160 thousandths approximately. I'm just going to verify that it's the same on both sides. Yep, it is. So we're going to go 160 thousandths just like that, and then since it is the same on both sides, I'll do the same thing I did earlier and just pop another one over the other side of that line. So now the depth of these doesn't matter too much, because I'm going to be cutting the entire middle out of this section, just so long as it goes into where the cutout will be. No problem, Ben. There is a expanded universe Jedi named Corin Horn who made his lightsaber handle out of the handle of an Imperial speeder bike. Solo's Hold has a version of it. I believe they call it the Maverick, but I'm not 100% on that. So since these two are the same size, I'm going to give them an equal relation size. Diameter of those is 120 thousandths. I'm going to go ahead and bump it up to 125 thousandths, just because oftentimes these holes will print a little bit smaller than they ought to. And Now I'll make sure we still have the clearance we need for our threads. And thank you for the host, Ben. I appreciate it. Okay, so now we've got our set screw locations figured. You know, I've been talking about a crystal focus, but I think I'm actually going to make this for the Prism soundboard, because I imagine that's going to be the most popular choice. And then I will go ahead and make other versions as necessary. But we're going to switch plans and put in a Prism. So I'm going to come normal to here. Actually, before I forget, there are 2 more little bitty holes. That need to be put in place. And tough part here is I have to figure out what the thread size is, because I'd rather not rely on just glue and a press fit, although that is an option. Let's take a look here and see if this looks like it's going to be a standard size or not. Gotta find the right Allen key. I have way too many of those floating around. I am definitely a fan of creative minds. Okay, so I have removed one of the switch assemblies from the switch holder. I'm now measuring the outside diameter of this screw. I'm assuming it's going to be a metric pitch. Alright, it is, with my calipers, it comes out to about 75 thousandths OD, which is approximately what an M2 screws OD would be. So we're going to go with M2 on that bad boy, and this will just give me an excuse to finally buy some metric taps, because I need some of those anyway. I'm going to put these things back together so I don't lose any of the parts. Just like so. Everything goes back in the box. And before I forget, see, I need M4 taps as well for a modification I'd like to do to some other hilts. So it really is helpful. It's going to be helpful to have that. So I'm going to grab a sticky note real quick and make myself a note. I'm going to have to buy some stuff off the interwebs pretty soon here anyway, to also grab some metric taps. Just, you know, basic, probably maybe like an M2 through M7, M8, somewhere around there. And that is going to go right on the border of one of my monitors. There we go. So now all I have to do is I'm going to pull up Google real quick. And take a peek here. We're going to look up the proper hole size for an M4 tap. I found a chart. Oh, of course, it only goes down to 3mm tap. So let's check it specifically. M2 tap hole size. All right, so it says 1/16 of an inch, which is equal to about 31 thousandths of an inch. But the fact is, I have 1/16 inch drills handy, and it's easy enough to model that in here. So not only will I have the correct size on the model, if for some reason it doesn't print right, I can clean out the hole with that drill. Let me hop back over to SolidWorks here. You guys are always going to see SolidWorks unless I explicitly place something else over the top, because I have it set to show the SolidWorks window rather than what I have on my screen at the moment. So we're back over at SolidWorks, and I'm measuring where this hole is going to need to be located. So I'm seeing about 90 thousandths here from the edge. 90, 92. Yep, we're gonna go with 92 thousandths. Hello there. Thank you very much for tuning in. I appreciate you dropping by. How is your day going? Bellator, you're a goof. You ought to be glad. You're lucky, because I like goofs. Although, to be perfectly honest, I was thinking the same thing. I don't think you're a true Star Wars fan if you don't think General Kenobi as soon as somebody says hello there. Ah, that's who it is. Once again, the actual depth of this cut isn't going to matter too much, because I'm just going to be hollowing out the middle of this section anyways. So we'll just give it a decent chunk of depth. And then earlier I used the mirror tool in a sketch, and now I'm going to use the mirror tool on a feature. So I'm going to mirror it across this plane here, the front plane. Select my features to mirror, boink, just like that. Bashing stuff, I like that. Bashing stuff together until it fits. I do a little bit of that myself, you know, when I'm not, if I've machined a really tight fit that I want to not come apart, you know, hammers happen. Or if I'm doing something like, for example, I'm working on a large cosplay sword right now that I haven't, that is, you know, it's not 3D printed or anything. I'm just kind of fiddling things together. So I definitely get you with the bashing thing, and I do think that's quite amusing. I was always you always hear if it doesn't work, yell at it and hit it with a hammer, and if it still doesn't work, yell louder and get a bigger hammer. Fix anything that way. So, Ben, I see that you are hosting me. May Thorell, I see that you are also hosting me. What types of things do you guys do on your channels? I'm knocking stuff down. Yeah, it does take a good chunk of cash to print metal. Um, there are certain things when 3D printing can be useful. For example, a lot of this chassis will be 3D printed. But for the most part, I prefer, in general, like I said, there are exceptions, but in general, I prefer to make things out of standard materials. If I'm most largely machining, but I also enjoy working with wood now and again. Mostly Minecraft. I used to play Minecraft a long time ago. Well then, Maythrel, maybe I will. I'm actually going to be busting out my old gaming skills or lack thereof tomorrow, as part of the May the 4th special. I'll be playing a little bit of Star Wars Battlefront, so maybe you might want to tune in for that. Look at me. I'm so busy talking to you guys that I am forgetting to work. What I'm doing now is I'm figuring out where the dead tree carcass. Yes, of course, dead tree carcass. I love I enjoy reading sometimes to de-stress. I'll bust out a novel, and I've heard people describe that as uh, looking at dead trees and hallucinating. And it's true, but I love it nonetheless. So Prism is about 800 thousandths wide, 810 thousandths or so. So we're going to go ahead and put this at 825 thousandths. Once again, we just got to make sure everything's going to fit in there nicely. And the thickness is about a 1/16 of an inch, I believe, which is also approximately 1.5 millimeters. Just measure that real quick. Yeah, it's about 65 thousandths, which is a little more than 1.5 millimeters. So I'm going to go 75 thousandths, just to be sure. I'm going to go ahead and give absolute definitions to those two dimensions because we don't want those changing on us. So I'm just got to find a space where this box fits well inside the external geometry of this section. So it's gonna want to sit right about there, I'm thinking. I may end up cutting off these two little knobs here. See, now the tricky part is that, you know, of course, the board is not entirely flat. There are bits and bobs that go on, which makes a slide-in chassis like this a little bit more difficult to figure out. Thinking. Welcome to the few viewers who have just tuned in. Thank you for dropping by. At the moment, working on figuring out the best way to stuff a prism inside this bad boy. Wait a minute. I've had a thought. What if instead of going in that way, I go in vertically? So this dimension here is about 860 thousandths, if I believe. Yes, that is about 860 thousandths. This is definitely going to be the better option. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of these guys here. Don't need that anymore. And I will put one in. First, I'm going to draw a center line so I can get to the middle of this dimension. As because it's cut off a little bit, you can see the center of that height is a little bit different from the actual center of the circle. So I'm going to go off of that, and I'm going to use a different type of rectangle this time, which is one that you build out from the center. I'm just going to go put it there, and dimension this with the same dimensions that I just decided we were going to go with. So that's 825 thousandths in that dimension and 75 thousandths in this dimension. My guesses were pretty close, which does leave a bit of a thin wall going on here. Thinner than I'd like, to be sure, but it's going to be a thin wall no matter how I orient it, just because there's not a whole lot of additional space inside this thing. We're looking at about 18 thousandths, or just a tiny, tiny bit less than half a millimeter for all you Germans tuning in. I would say a hair less than half a millimeter, but a hair is way thicker than that amount there. A hair is about twice as thick as the difference between the half a millimeter and that dimension. So the nice thing about putting this in vertically is that, as I mentioned, either way there's going to be some thin walls going on, and I may have to, in fact, cut out one of those walls. But the nice thing about putting it in this way is that it should be, there's a lot more space on the two sides over here and over here for me to put in clearance for all the little bits and bobs that are on the board, as opposed to going flat-wise. There would have been an issue. There would have been an issue, yes. So my thought is, with the crystal focus, when that version comes, I can't stick the crystal focus vertically because it has that large driver on it that would interfere with these, and so it'll just kind of have to sit in there flat, and it will be two entirely separate chunks of chassis that go on either side of it, is what I'm thinking. I mean, hey, metric maybe makes a little more sense. You know, everything's all nice, even increments. Everything's based off of 10. It does make sense. But hey, ours sounds cooler. Imperial. I'm Star Wars. I'm a Galactic Empire bad guy, apparently. I should get myself a Stormtrooper hat. I'm rounding these corners off right now with the fillet tool. Because what these dimensions are here, this is just a baseline for approximately where I generally like to keep my wall thickness. But because I'm making this the same dimension as the wall thickness there. And, you know, come to think of it, I'm going to actually thin that wall down just a hair more. Yeah, I like my Mando bucket too. It's a little bit broken right now. I dropped it off of something and it's cracked, but I'm working on fixing it. So I'm going to make this thing a little bit thinner. 10 thousandths, or a little bit more than 1/4 of a millimeter. Which is still plenty big to print properly. And then I'm going to come in here and again put in these dudes, but with the correct dimension. Oh yeah. Yes, absolutely, Beskar Gam for the win. People look at me funny when I start using Mandalorian terms. I do it all the time I do it on my Facebook page though, and all the time in my email newsletters. I throw Mandalorian at people. I will fix it just as soon as I can. I'm bummed out that it's busted. I'm going to once again put just a little bit of a fillet on these edges. We're going with approximately 1/4 of a millimeter round on these ones here. Oh no! I have made a mistake, folks. All right. So, remember I remember these guys that I put in? Yeah. Those screws are going to mess with my idea of putting in the board vertically. Because, of course, there's going to be screw heads in here that would get in the way of that. Hey, man. Mandalorian doesn't care how you look. Just care your spirit's in the right place. You're ready to fight to protect Mandalore at all times. The Rezolnare don't say a single thing about body type. Man, that's bumming me out. Because I thought I was having a good idea there. A Death Trooper cosplay. That'll be cool. Yeah, I'm going to upgrade my Mando suit. I'm going to go full metal. I'm going to go with 1/8" stainless steel, which is about 3 millimeters for you guys. That I'm going to make all the armor plates out of. I'm not sure how I'm going to do the helmet yet, because a helmet out of metal sounds like a really hard thing. That's beyond my skill set. So I may just use a cast helmet that's been, either plated or just painted up nice to look like stainless. Or I might have somebody else do it. All right, I'm going to Bellator, so much love for wet words. You'll have to be a little specific because there's enough of a delay between when I say things and when you see them, and then consequently when you type a response and then it gets back to me, that I get a little bit confused sometimes, and I'm not quite sure what you're saying there. I'm gonna go ahead and cut this out while I think about this. My original plan was just to, have this build the rest of the chassis coming off this direction, off of that, and I would of course add a little bit more thickness here and here, so that the screws thread in properly. Heatsink would sit right up against there. Oh boy. I thought I had the grandest idea to ever idea, but apparently not. What made me realize it was actually, I was thinking that instead of having this round down here, I would put a nice flat spot so the screw heads could rest against them. But that, of course, as I mentioned, gets in the way of the board. This is a little bit tricky. If anybody has any suggestions, I'm definitely open to them at this point. Oh, and I see the prism would fit just fine. But if I put the prism in, then the screws don't fit. And if I don't put the screws in, well then, how am I supposed to attach all this stuff to the hilt? There's a part of me that would say, just kind of fit it in there. Make it so it's a nice snug fit. Drill in a set screw and call it good, and that would work just fine. There would not be any issues with that. The problem is that the screws don't only hold on this switch section, they also hold in the large black rubber grip that goes opposite of the switches. That grip is attached to a piece of aluminum that has the screw tapped and threaded into it, and that is what that fits inside the chromed piece, which I believe is brass. It's either brass or stainless, but I'm guessing brass. Hot glue. There you go. Perfect answer. I'm trying to figure out. I honestly, there's not an issue with just using a set screw to keep the chassis in place. That's just fine. It's just the problem of the screws hold the upper body together as well. I'm fiddling with it right now. All right. So, I may have to change around my plan entirely and rearrange the components. That might be what ends up happening here. Because as much as I liked this idea, it's given me trouble. But before I abandon it completely, I'm throwing some pieces together here. I'm gonna do a little bit of mock-up and measurement. Because if I only use one of the two screw holes, that's still going to be plenty to hold everything together. And if I use the one that's in the back, rather than in the front, I can stick my prism in about yay far. About like so. Let me hold that in place. And bust out my calipers again to figure out how badly that would affect the blade depth. I'm assuming pretty badly. Oh yeah, it doesn't look good. Doesn't look good, folks. Alright, that would knock us down to about 1 1/4 inches, which as a blade depth isn't an issue. But as a blade plus a heatsink depth, yeah, that's a bit of a problem. Not to mention that the included blade plug is longer than that. Now that's, of course, could be remedied, but the less things that people have to do to get this to work, the better. Now, if I were doing this with a nano or a crystal shard, that would work just fine, but people seem to really like prisms, and I can't blame them. I like prisms a lot myself. They're a great little board. Probably my favorite. Followed by crystal shard, I would think. Out of the Plector lineup, it's prism, crystal shard. If I go the other direction with it, that of course solves the blade depth problem. But it worsens the problem that I was mentioning with the battery earlier that we're trying to avoid by doing it this way. So I've got my calipers extended out to the length of a battery. Slide the board back in, put it where it would stop. Yeah, we'd be sticking out by like 1.25 inches with the battery there, which would leave us, let's see here. I'm gonna just do some measurement on this model over here. So that's about 3 5/8 of an inch. So if I were to subtract 1.25 inches, we'd have duct tape. We'd have about 2 3/8 of an inch left, minus 1/2 inch for the speaker. Yeah, we'd have about 1 7/8 inches of space to work with for the actual crystal chamber, which isn't too bad. Honestly, that's plenty of space. So I may go about it that way. The only thing that I don't particularly like about that solution is that instead of having our crystal about here, we'd have our crystal about here, which I generally prefer to have it around the middle of the hilt. I feel like that's the best place to put them. But the option may be just to stick it down here. Unfortunately, there's not enough clearance here. Oh, no way. That liquid tape is only for the purpose of insulating electrical joints. It's not a very strong bond at all. I would never use that as glue. If I was going to do something like that, I would just bust out the cyanoacrylate. So if I throw in a circle here, that is the size of a battery. So as you can see, there's no way that a battery is going to fit through that switch section. Which is why I was trying to put the board in there, because the more things you can cram up in the front, the better. That means you can do more down here for the crystal. So I think unless I can figure out a way to stick the board in sideways, I don't know. I'm gonna take another shot at sideways with the board, I think, because that would allow it to go over the tops of the screws, of course. What if I did? The other problem, and I mean it's not a critical issue. The other problem with having the board up in the front there is it's going to make it very tricky to get the SD card out if you want to change the sound font. So maybe I'm going to try rearranging this thing entirely and just using the included blade holder or switch holder. Although it really is just massive. It's a lot of overkill if you ask me. Better that than underkill. This is probably not very entertaining for all you watching. I'm just sitting here with my brain gears turning. Alright, so if I put the board there instead, and then I put the battery not an option. Not gonna work at all. That was a bogus idea. Here's the thing, though. I'm noticing that it's a very snug fit up between all of these parts. Once they are assembled, there's not a whole lot of movement that goes on. So if I could come up with a different way I'm thinking about going with the prism in the same way I had it, but coming up with a different affixation method for that grip, because even with no affixation, it's still a pretty daggum sturdy assembly, just because the parts were machined to a nice high tolerance. Also, there's a gold ring in here that I'm not sure what it's for. I'm going to do a bit of research real quick here. Pull up the old interwebs. I'm a little stumped, guys. Are there solutions? Yeah. Are there solutions that I like? Um, Not so much. Welcome, new viewer. Thank you for tuning in. I'm having a bit of a conundrum at the moment. My original plan, turns out, is not going to work that well. So I am coming up with a new one. I know it doesn't look like I'm doing much. That's because I'm not doing much. I'm just sitting here with my brain gears turning. If you give them just a minute, they'll come up with something. Fiddling with the hilt itself a little bit, trying to, and the prism and a battery, just trying to figure out best location of the different parts and so on. Yes, Bellator, it's getting close to that time. I think I may just go ahead and call it here, as I'm rather stuck. To be perfectly honest with you, as I mentioned, there are a few ideas kicking around in my head that would work, but none of them I particularly like all that much. And I just want to be sure that whatever I come up with is going to be the best possible solution. So I think I will end the modeling there for today. But I did promise more details about what I'm doing tomorrow. I'm going to be, as I mentioned last stream, doing a chassis deal for everybody so they can get their chassis and their sabers installed for cheaper. I will also be doing a giveaway, and that more details will come. You'll have to tune in to tomorrow's live to find out the full details of everything. I will make a post announcing the time of that, so be sure to tune in, drop a follow on Twitch, and subscribe on YouTube so you don't miss anything. I look forward to seeing you all then, and thank you ever so much for listening in today. Have a good one, and koyashi.